Commander stood on the bridge of the battle cruiser Eternal Vigil, watching numbers scroll across the tactical display. His dark eyes showed nothing as he calculated how many people would die today. It was the year 2247, and humanity was losing the war against the collective. Slowly, quietly, one colony at a time. The planet below, 7, was about to become another name on the list of places humanity used to live. "Commander, we have 50,000 civilians requesting evacuation," Lieutenant reported from her station. Her voice was steady, professional. She had learned not to show emotion around. "The bombardment fleet will arrive in 6 hours." Nodded once. His fingers moved across his command tablet, pulling up capacity reports. The Eternal Vigil could safely hold 35,000 people. Maybe 40,000 if they packed the cargo bays and ignored safety regulations. But 50,000? Impossible. "Begin evacuation protocol," he said. "Priority Alpha, scientists, engineers, medical personnel. Priority Beta, families with children under 10. Priority Gamma, skilled workers." He paused, then added, "Everyone else goes to secondary transport." His fingers hesitated over her console for just a moment. "Sir, the secondary transport won't arrive for 7 hours. They will be here in 6. "I'm aware, Lieutenant." That was the end of the discussion. Transmitted the orders. Down on the planet, people would be receiving notifications on their devices. Some would see green lights, permission to board the Eternal Vigil. Others would see yellow, instructions to wait for secondary transport. They would wait and they would hope, and many of them would die. Had made these calculations before, he would make them again. This was war, and war required hard choices. The Iron Commander, they called him. It was meant as a compliment. Iron didn't bend. Iron didn't break. Iron didn't feel. 3 hours into the evacuation, walked through the refugee processing center. It was mandatory, checking on the civilians, making sure everything ran smoothly. He hated this part. The crying children, the grateful families thanking him for saving them, not knowing he had condemned others to die in their place. The processing center was chaos. Thousands of people pressed together, clutching bags and children and pets. Security officers shouted instructions. Medical teams scanned for diseases. Data clerks' identities and assigned quarters. In the middle of all this noise and panic, saw her. A girl, maybe 14 years old, sitting alone on a bench against the far wall. She had short black hair and wore a simple gray jacket. While everyone around her pushed and shouted and cried, she sat perfectly still. In her hands, she held an old notebook, not a data pad or a tablet, an actual paper notebook, bound in worn leather. Found himself walking toward her. He didn't know why. Perhaps because her calmness was so strange in this place of fear. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and clear. "They're gone," she said simply. "Gone where?" "Just gone. They died in the last raid 3 months ago." Nodded. "I see. Do you have other family on board?" "No." "Then why are you here? This section is for families." The girl tilted her head slightly. "A security officer told me to wait here. He said someone would process my papers." She held up the notebook. "I have everything ready." Looked at the notebook more closely. It was old, very old, the kind of thing you might find in a museum. "What's in the notebook?" "Nothing yet," the girl said. "It's empty." "Then why carry it?" "Because empty means it could be anything. It could be a story or a poem or a list of important things. It's full of possibility." She smiled slightly. "My mother gave it to me before she died. She said not to write in it until I found a story worth telling." Felt something uncomfortable in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. He pushed it away. "What's your name?" "Well, someone will help you soon. Stay here." He turned to walk away, but her voice stopped him. "Commander." He looked back, surprised she knew his name. "Yes." "Do you have a story worth telling?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm a soldier. I follow orders and win battles." "That's not a story," said. "That's just things that happen. A story is about why they happen, about what matters." Stared at her for a long moment, then walked away without answering. 2 hours later, the eternal vigil was full. 35,000 refugees packed every available space. The cargo bays held another 3,000, pressed together in violation of every safety regulation, had pushed the numbers as far as they would go. 15,000 people remained on 7, waiting for a secondary transport that was still an hour away. "Commander, we need to leave now," said. "The fleet just entered the system. They're moving faster than predicted." Looked at the tactical display. The red dots representing ships were closing on 7. The secondary transport was a single blue dot, still too far away. The math was simple. The secondary transport wouldn't make it. "Seal all airlocks," ordered. "Prepare to break orbit." "Sir, the people on the ground." "I know, Lieutenant." The Eternal Vigil's engines roared to life. The massive ship lifted away from the planet, climbing toward the safety of deep space. On the bridge, watched the blue dot of the secondary transport racing toward the planet. He watched the red dots of the fleet getting closer. "Secondary transport is requesting permission to land," the communications officer reported. Said, "Tell them to abort and retreat." "Sir, they're ignoring the order. They're going in anyway." Of course they were. The crew of the secondary transport knew 15,000 people were waiting. They would try to save them, even knowing it was suicide. Watched it happen. The secondary transport entered 7's atmosphere. The fleet arrived. Their weapons lit up the darkness of space. The blue dot disappeared. For a moment the bridge was silent, then cleared her throat. "Jumping to hyperspace in 30 seconds, Commander." "Proceed." The Eternal Vigil jumped away, leaving behind a dead planet and 15,000 ghosts. That night, unable to sleep, walked through the refugee quarters. He told himself he was inspecting conditions. Really, he didn't know why he was there. The lights were dimmed for sleeping hours. Families huddled together in small spaces. Children cried. Adults whispered prayers. He found in a corner near an observation window. She was still awake, still holding her notebook. The stars streamed past outside the window as the ship traveled through hyperspace. "Can't sleep?" asked. Looked up at him. "I was thinking about stories." "And?" "Every person on this ship has one. Every person we left behind had one too." She opened her notebook, showing him the blank pages. "I was trying to decide which ones to remember, which ones to write down. There are too many. I can only write so much." Felt that uncomfortable feeling in his chest again, stronger now. "You should sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult." "Commander," said as he turned to leave, "when you make choices like today, do you remember the people, or just the numbers?" He didn't answer. He walked away back to his quarters where he wrote his report. Evacuation successful. 38,000 civilians saved. Acceptable losses. Mission complete. He didn't mention, or her question. He didn't mention how his hands shook as he wrote the words acceptable losses. He didn't mention that he could still see the blue dot disappearing from his tactical display, over and over, every time he closed his eyes. In her corner by the observation window, opened her notebook and wrote the first words on the first page. "Today, 15,000 people died so that I could live. Tomorrow, I will decide if their story is worth telling." 2 weeks passed like a slow wound that wouldn't heal. The Eternal Vigil docked at Firebase Meridian, a massive military station floating in the darkness between stars. Filed his reports, attended his briefings, and received his commendations. Fleet Command praised his efficient evacuation of 7. The numbers looked good on paper. 38,000 saved. A victory. But at night saw faces in his dreams. Faces in the crowd on 7 looking up at his ship as it lifted away. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their stories. but he saw their faces over and over until he woke up sweating in his quarters. He stopped sleeping well. Then he stopped sleeping at all. He worked instead, planning the next mission, studying tactical patterns, calculating probabilities. Numbers were safe. Numbers didn't have faces. Lieutenant noticed the change. She found him on the bridge at 3 in the morning, staring at star charts. "Commander, you should rest," she said carefully. "I'm fine, Lieutenant." "Sir, with respect, you haven't left the bridge in 16 hours. I said I'm fine." His voice was sharp, final. Knew better than to push. She left him alone with his star charts and his calculations. During the day, avoided the refugee sections of the ship. Fleet regulations required weekly inspections of civilian areas, but he kept delaying. He sent junior officers instead. He told himself he was too busy. Really, he just couldn't face them. Couldn't face the people who were alive because others were dead. But regulations were regulations. On the 14th day, the inspection could no longer be delayed. Walked through the refugee quarters, clipboard in hand, checking systems and supplies. The civilians gave him space. Some nodded respectfully. Others looked away. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew the choice he had made. He found in the observation deck, sitting cross-legged on the floor. The notebook was in her lap, open. Walked closer and saw something that made him stop. The pages were still empty. 2 weeks had passed since 7, and she hadn't written a single word beyond that first page. "Why haven't you written anything?" he asked. Looked up at him. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "I'm still deciding," she said. "Deciding what?" "Which story to tell, which one matters most." She ran her hand across the blank page. "Once I write something, that page is filled. It can't be anything else, so I have to choose carefully." Sat down on a nearby bench. He didn't know why. He should have finished his inspection and left, but something about her calm presence made him stay. "That's not how writing works," he said. "You just write. You don't sit around waiting for the perfect story." "Maybe," said, "but my mother told me this notebook is special. She said the emptiness is the point. The blank page is full of every possible story. Once you write, you lose all the other possibilities, so you better make sure it's worth it." "That's a good way to never write anything at all." Smiled, "or a good way to make sure what you write actually matters." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the stars drift past the observation windows, then spoke again. "Do you remember their names, Commander?" "Whose names?" "The people from 7, the ones who made it onto this ship." Frowned. "There are 38,000 refugees on board. I don't know all their names." "What about the ones who didn't make it? Do you remember them?" The uncomfortable feeling came back, tightening around's chest. "I remember the numbers. 15,000 casualties. It's in my report." "Numbers aren't people," said quietly. "My mother was a person. She liked to drink tea in the morning and read old books. She laughed at terrible jokes. She cried during sad movies. She was a person, not a number. The 15,000 people who died were all people. They all had names and stories and things they loved." "I know that," said, his voice rougher than he intended. "But knowing doesn't change anything. The math was simple. We couldn't save everyone." "No, you couldn't save everyone. But did you try to remember everyone? Did you see them as people when you made your choice, or just as numbers in a calculation?" Stood up abruptly. "I did my duty. I saved as many as I could. That's all any commander can do." "Maybe," said, "but when you look at your empty pages, Commander, what do you see? What story are you telling yourself about who you are?" Walked away without answering, but her words followed him. Over the next few days seemed to appear everywhere went. She was in the mess hall when he grabbed his morning coffee. She was in the corridor when he headed to briefings. She was in the observation deck when he tried to find a quiet place to think. She never followed him. She never sought him out, but she was always there. And every time he saw her, she was holding that empty notebook. "Why do you carry that everywhere?" he asked one day, frustrated. "Because it reminds me," said. "Reminds you of what?" "That I haven't chosen yet, that I still have time to decide what story matters. What about you, Commander? What reminds you that you're still choosing?" "I don't need reminders. I make choices every day." "Do you, or do you just follow the same pattern? Calculate the numbers, make the efficient choice, file the report, move to the next mission. Is that choosing, or is that just avoiding choice?" Wanted to be angry. Wanted to tell this girl she didn't understand command, didn't understand war, didn't understand the weight of responsibility. But he couldn't, because somewhere deep inside he knew she was right. The nightmares got worse. Now when he saw the faces, they spoke to him. They asked him why. Why them? Why not others? What made some lives worth more than others? He had no answers. 3 weeks after 7, new orders came through. Another colony under attack. Another evacuation needed. Station, home to 200,000 people. Pulled up the tactical data. His ship could hold 40,000, maybe 50 if they pushed it. Other ships were on the way, but the would arrive first. He started running the calculations, the same cold mathematics he always used. Priority alpha, priority beta, priority gamma, the efficient choice, the logical choice. He was halfway through the calculations when someone placed something on his command console. It was Notebook. He looked up and saw her standing there, somehow on the bridge despite all security protocols. 2 security officers were running toward her, but she spoke before they reached her. "Every time you choose, Commander, you write in someone else's story. You write whether they live or die, whether they matter or don't matter. The question is, are you writing tragedy or hope? Are you writing efficiency or humanity?" She looked at the notebook on his console. "Your book isn't empty yet. You can still choose what story you're telling." Security took her away, escorting her gently but firmly off the bridge. But the notebook remained. Stared at it for a long time. The leather was worn smooth from handling. He opened it carefully. Inside, the pages were still blank except for that first page with words about the 15,000 dead. He thought about the faces from his nightmares. He thought about's question. Did he remember them as people or as numbers? The ship jumped to hyperspace toward station. The whole journey, 12 hours through the dark between stars, sat at his command console with his notebook beside him. He didn't open it again. He didn't need to. He knew what question it was asking. What story was he telling, and was it worth writing? Station hung in space like a dying star. It was a mining colony built inside a massive asteroid, home to 200,000 people who extracted rare minerals from the rock. Now they were coming, and all those people wanted to leave. His tactical display showed the terrible mathematics. 4 battleships were 3 hours away. His ship could hold 50,000 if they packed everyone in tight. Other human ships were coming, but they wouldn't arrive until 5 hours from now. 2 hours too late. He could save 50,000. Maybe 60,000 if he made people stand in the cargo holds. But that still left 140,000 with nowhere to go. Lieutenant stood beside him, waiting for orders. "Sir, how should we prioritize the evacuation?" This was the moment. This was where he would normally say priority alpha, priority beta, priority gamma. Scientists first, engineers next, young families, the logical choices, the efficient ones. Looked at his notebook, still sitting on his command console where she had left it. "Contact all ships in the area," he said slowly. "Military, civilian, cargo haulers, personal yachts, everything. Tell them we need help at station." "Sir, most civilian ships aren't equipped for rescue operations." "I know, call them anyway." Looked confused but transmitted the message. Then she asked again, "What about our evacuation priorities?" Took a deep breath. "Change of protocol. We evacuate families first, complete family units, parents with children, grandparents with, we keep them together." "But sir, that's not strategic. We should prioritize people with valuable skills and what, Lieutenant? And leave the children behind. Leave the old people who built this colony. Leave the artists and teachers and shopkeepers who made it a home. He shook his head. No, we're doing this differently. We save the families. We save the people who make us human. The bridge was silent. Officers stared at their commander, shocked. The Iron Commander was making an emotional decision. It went against everything they had learned. "This isn't efficient, sir," said quietly. "No," agreed. "It's not efficient, but it's right. This is the human variable, Lieutenant. This is why they can't beat us, because we don't just calculate, we care. We choose based on more than numbers." He opened a channel to all personnel. "Attention all crew, new mission priorities. We are evacuating station based on family units. Keep families together. Make room for everyone we can. I don't care if people have to stand. I don't care if we violate safety regulations. We're getting as many people off that station as possible, and we're doing it the human way." The evacuation began. Shuttles flew back and forth between the Eternal Vigil and station. But this time, instead of checking credentials and skills, they looked for families. Parents clutching children. Elderly couples holding hands after 60 years of marriage. Teenagers with their younger siblings. They came aboard together, stayed together. The ship filled quickly. 40,000, 50,000, 60,000. People packed into every corner, every hallway, every available space. "Commander," the communications officer called out, "we're getting responses to your call for help." "How many ships?" 37, sir. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, personal transports. They're all changing course to help." Felt something warm in his chest. Hope, maybe. Coordinate with them. Have them dock at station and take on as many people as they can. But then the tactical display lit up with a new threat. The ships had changed course. They were moving faster now, accelerating toward station. "They're going to arrive early," said, her voice tight. 2 hours instead of 3. "How many people are still on the station?" 90,000, sir." The mathematics had changed, but the problem remained the same. They couldn't save everyone. Not anymore. "Order all civilian ships to evacuate immediately," commanded. "Tell them to run." "And us, sir?" Looked at the tactical display. If the Eternal Vigil ran now, they could escape. The ship was full. 70,000 people safe. It was a good number. Fleet Command would call it a success. But 90,000 would die. He thought about his question. What story was he writing? "We stay," he said. "Sir," looked at him like he was crazy. "We'll be here in 2 hours. We can't evacuate 90,000 people in 2 hours. We can try, and we can buy time for those civilian ships to get people out." "Commander, this is suicide. Our ship isn't designed to fight 4 battleships alone." "I know." His hands moved across his console, bringing up weapon systems and defensive shields. "But those 90,000 people are depending on us. I won't leave them behind. Not again." He opened a channel to the entire ship. "This is Commander. In approximately 2 hours, 4 battleships will arrive. We're going to stay and buy time for the evacuation. This isn't an order. This is a choice. Anyone who wants to evacuate with the civilian ships can do so now. I won't think less of you." The bridge was silent. Then one by one his officers spoke. "I'm staying," Commander said. "Weapons ready, sir," the tactical officer reported. "Engineering at full power," came the voice from below decks. Felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." The next 2 hours were chaos. Shuttles flew constantly between the station and the civilian ships. The cargo haulers opened their holds, packing in refugees. Personal yachts designed for 5 people took 20. Mining vessels stripped out equipment to make room for passengers. And the Eternal Vigil waited, engines hot, weapons armed, watching the red dots on the tactical display grow closer. "Last shuttle returning, sir," the flight deck reported. "All civilian ships are pulling away." How many did we save? There was a pause. 130,000, Commander. The civilian fleet took 70,000. We have 60,000 on board. 130,000. Felt something break inside him, but it was a good break, like ice melting after a long winter. 70,000 still on the station, said quietly. I know. They arrived right on schedule. 4 massive battleships dropping out of hyperspace, their weapon systems already charging. They saw the eternal vigil and seemed almost amused. 1 human ship standing alone to defend an evacuated station. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was human. Open fire, ordered. The battle was brutal. The Eternal Vigil was a good ship, well-armed, well-crewed, but it was 1 ship against 4. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams cut through darkness. The human ship's shields flickered and failed. Hull breaches opened. Systems went offline. Shield at 30%, reported. Multiple hull breaches. Fire in Section 7. Keep fighting. Then something impossible happened. The civilian ships came back. Not all of them, but enough. Cargo haulers not designed for combat turned around and charged toward the mining vessels with industrial cutting lasers fired them as weapons. A personal yacht, tiny and fragile, flew straight at a battleship and rammed it. What are they doing? Gasped. Understood. They're choosing just like we chose. An old woman's voice came over the radio. This is captain of the cargo ship Second Chance. You saved my commander, all 8 of them. Now I'm saving you. Her ship slammed into a destroyer, and both exploded in a ball of fire. More civilian ships joined the battle. They had no military training, no coordination, no strategy, but they had something else. They had gratitude. They had anger. They had the same thing had found. They had the human variable. The tactical computers couldn't handle it. They were designed to fight logical opponents who followed predictable patterns. But humans weren't predictable. Cargo ships ramming battleships. Mining lasers cutting through armor. Dozens of small ships swarming like angry bees, each one willing to sacrifice itself to save others. The lost. 2 battleships destroyed. The other 2 damaged and retreating. The human ships, what was left of them, hung in space around station. Slumped in his command chair, exhausted. His ship was barely functional. Fires burned on 3 decks. Life support was failing in sections. But they had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. Casualty report, he said quietly. 17 civilian ships destroyed, reported. Her voice was thick with emotion. Including captain's ship, but everyone else made it. All 130,000 refugees are safe. That night found in the refugee quarters. She was sitting by the observation window again, notebook in her lap. This time when he looked, he saw words on the second page. What did you write? He asked. Looked up at him and smiled. Today, the commander remembered what he was fighting for, and it changed everything. Sat beside her. His hands were shaking. He realized he was crying. He hadn't cried in 15 years. I saw their faces this time, he said. The people we saved, I saw them. They weren't numbers, they were people. I know, said. 17 ships didn't make it. Captain died saving us. She chose her story, said gently. Just like you chose yours, you gave her a future. She gave you a second chance. Picked up a pen from supplies. Can I write in your notebook? It's your story too now, she said. He wrote beneath her words, and I will never forget again. 3 months after station, everything changed. News of the battle spread across human space like fire. The story grew with each telling. The Iron Commander who found his heart. The civilians who fought back. The girl with the notebook who inspired it all. Hated the attention. Reporters wanted interviews. Fleet Command wanted him to give speeches. Other commanders wanted to know his secret. How did he win against impossible odds? The truth was simple and complicated at the same time. He stopped seeing people as numbers. He started seeing them as human beings worth fighting for, and that changed everything. Fleet Command didn't understand at first. They studied the battle records from station, looking for some tactical genius they could replicate. They ran the numbers through computers, trying to find the pattern. "It doesn't make sense," Admiral Menu told during a video conference. "You made the inefficient choice. By all calculations, you should have lost." "Maybe that's the point," said. "We're fighting computers with logic. Tactical systems are programmed for efficiency, but we're not computers, we're human. When we fight for something that matters, we fight harder. We fight smarter. We do impossible things." "You're suggesting we make military strategy based on emotions." "I'm suggesting we remember what makes us human. They can match our technology. They can't match our heart." Admiral Menu was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Write it up. Turn it into a proper tactical doctrine. If this works, we need every ship in the fleet using it." So wrote, he called it the Human Heart Protocol. It was simple. Don't just protect civilians. Include them, trust them. Let them be part of the fight. Keep families together because family makes people fight harder. Value every life, not just the useful ones. Make decisions based on what's right, not just what's efficient. Other commanders laughed at first. Then they tried it, and it worked. Again and again it worked. Civilian morale increased across human space. When people felt valued, when they felt protected, they wanted to help. Militia groups formed on colony worlds. Civilian ships volunteered for defense patrols. Engineers and scientists worked harder, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Became known as the changed commander. Some saw him as a hero. Others thought he had gone soft, lost his edge. But no one could argue with his results. He kept winning battles everyone said were unwinnable. Through it all, stayed close. She became an unofficial advisor, though Fleet Command would never formally recognize a 14-year-old girl in that role. She sat in on strategy meetings, listening more than speaking. When she did speak, people listened. "The girl with the book," soldiers called her. Some thought she was good luck. Others thought she had some kind of special power to read people and predict behavior. Really, she was just observant. She watched how people acted when they were afraid, when they were hopeful, when they were determined. And she understood patterns that computers couldn't see. Her notebook was still mostly empty. 3 months and she had only written 3 pages. Each page marked a moment that mattered, the evacuation of 7, change at station, and a 3rd page she wrote after watching human and forces clash in a border skirmish. On that page she wrote, "The enemy is starting to wonder. They see us doing impossible things. They don't understand why, and that confusion is a weapon." She was right. Deep in space, Admiral studied reports with growing frustration. Was a logical being as all were. They thought in probabilities and optimal strategies. Emotions were inefficient. They clouded judgment and led to poor decisions. But humans were making emotional decisions and winning. It made no sense. Watched recordings of the station battle over and over, analyzed every moment. The humans should have run. Instead, they stayed and fought. Civilians with no military training joined the battle. Ships rammed into vessels in suicide attacks. All of it was inefficient. All of it should have failed. But it worked. "We need to understand human emotions," told the High Command. "We need to predict this behavior." So they began studying human culture. They analyzed art, music, literature. They tried to understand concepts like love, sacrifice, and hope. But understanding and feeling were different things. They could define these emotions, but they couldn't experience them. They remained mysteries. "There must be a central cause," concluded. "This change began with one commander, one ship. Find commander, eliminate him. The human resistance will collapse." Intelligence went to work. They learned about his history, his victories, his losses, the Battle of the Crimson Nebula where his first crew died, his years as the Iron Commander, his sudden change at station. And they learned about the girl with the notebook, an analyst reported. She appears in multiple records. The humans seem to value her. Some reports suggest she influences commanders' decisions. A child found this confusing. Why would a military commander listen to a child? Human emotions are involved. Family bonds, protective instincts, symbolic meaning. The analysis is incomplete. It doesn't matter. If she's important to them, she's a target. Find them both. Eliminate them. The human resistance will return to its previous inefficient state. The plan there: attack carefully. Firebase Meridian, where the Eternal Vigil was docked for repairs. A massive assault, overwhelming force. The goal wasn't to capture the base. It was to kill two specific people. The attack came at dawn, station time. Alarms screamed throughout Firebase Meridian. Ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately launched boarding craft. Dozens of them heading straight for the Eternal Vigil. "They're not attacking the base defenses," shouted over the chaos. "They're coming right for us." Understood immediately. "They're here for me. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. Get the civilians off the ship now." "Sir, we don't have time." "Do it, Lieutenant. That's an order." The evacuation began, but it was too slow. Boarding parties breached the Eternal Vigil's hull. Armed soldiers poured into the corridors. They moved with purpose, not randomly. They knew where they were going. "Commander, you need to get to the escape pods," urged. "Not without my crew." "Sir, this is suicide." "Then it's suicide with purpose. Hold this ship as long as possible. Give everyone time to evacuate." Fought his way through his own ship, helping wounded soldiers, directing civilians to escape routes. He found himself pushed back toward the observation deck. Soldiers surrounded him, cutting off every exit. Then appeared, calm as always, her notebook clutched to her chest. "What are you doing here?" demanded. "You should be on an evacuation shuttle." "I couldn't leave," she said simply. "Our story isn't finished yet. These soldiers are here to kill us." "I know," she opened her notebook. "That's why I finally know what to write." Soldiers closed in, 20 of them, weapons raised. Stepped in front of, though he knew it was hopeless. He had no weapon, no armor, just determination. Then a hologram flickered to life above them. Admiral appeared, looking down with emotionless eyes. "Commander," said, "you are the variable causing inefficiency in human military operations. Eliminate the variable, restore order." "I'm not a variable," said. "I'm a person. We all are. That's what you'll never understand." "Emotions make you weak." "No," said, stepping forward. "Emotions make us strong. That's why you're losing." She opened her notebook and began to write. As she wrote, she spoke the words aloud. Somehow, her voice carried across the ship's communication system, broadcasting to every human and every on board. "Once upon a time," she said, "there were beings who lived by pure logic. They were efficient and powerful and feared nothing. Then they met humans who lived by something they couldn't understand. Humans loved each other. They sacrificed for each other. They hoped for better futures and fought for dreams that didn't exist yet. The logical beings thought this was weakness, but it was the greatest strength in the universe. Because when you have something worth fighting for, you can do impossible things." The soldiers paused. Their orders were clear: kill the targets. But they hesitated, trying to process these words that made no logical sense. In that moment of hesitation, human reinforcements arrived. Security teams, civilian militia, anyone who could hold a weapon. They poured into the observation deck, and the battle turned. But the damage was done, not to humans, too. Because words were broadcast across open channels, and in space, listening to those transmissions, something changed. Some began to wonder, what if emotions weren't weakness? What if there was something beyond logic? The seeds of doubt were planted, and doubt, once it takes root, grows fast. Watch from the command ship, frustrated and confused. The mission had failed. Worse, it had backfired. Now they had questions they couldn't answer. Questions about purpose, about meaning, about what they were fighting for. And questions, realized too late, were more dangerous than any weapon. 6 months passed and the war turned in humanity's favor, not because humans built better weapons or ships, but because they started asking questions. Questions led to doubt. Doubt led to hesitation, and hesitation in war was fatal. The Human Heart Protocol became standard across the entire fleet. Civilians weren't just protected anymore. They were partners. Colony worlds built their own defenses. Merchant ships joined military patrols. Families stayed together, and that made everyone fight harder. Humanity was winning, but knew the final battle was coming. They would either commit fully or surrender. There was no middle ground left. The human fleet gathered at the border of space. 20 battleships, including the Eternal Vigil, now fully repaired. Admiral Menu commanded from the flagship, but everyone knew his ship would lead the assault. He was the changed commander. He was the symbol. Sat on the bridge, something Fleet Command had stopped questioning months ago. Her notebook was nearly full now. She had documented everything. The evacuations, the battles, the quiet moments between. Only the last page remained blank. "What will you write on the last page?" Lieutenant asked her. "The ending," said. "Every story needs one. I'm still waiting to see what ours will be." The fleet jumped into space, expecting immediate combat. Instead, they found something strange. The command station hung in space, weapons powered down. No defensive formations. No attack ships launching. "Is it a trap?" asked. Studied the tactical display. "I don't think so. Something's wrong." Then a communication request came through. Not from a commander or admiral, from Admiral himself, leader of the entire military. Accepted the call, appeared on the admiral looked the same as before, emotionless and cold, but something in the eyes was different, uncertain maybe. Commander said, "I request parley." "Parley, you want to talk?" "Yes, I believe we have reached an impasse. Not military, philosophical." Glanced at, she nodded slightly. He looked back at, "I'm listening." 6 months ago, you sent a message across open channels. The girl with the notebook spoke of strength through emotion, of fighting for things that don't exist yet. We analyzed these words. We studied your culture. We tried to understand. And we found something we didn't expect. We found questions. What is the purpose of victory if there is no joy in winning? What is the point of survival if there is nothing worth surviving for? What is efficiency if it lacks meaning? Paused, and for the first time, showed something that might have been emotion, confusion, maybe even pain. "We are fracturing, Commander. Our society was built on logic and efficiency, but your example has introduced a variable we cannot process. Some now question our purpose. They ask why we fight. They wonder what we are fighting for. We have no answers." "What are you saying?" asked carefully. "I am saying we cannot win this war, not because you are stronger, but because you possess something we lack. You have hope. You have purpose. You fight for futures that don't exist yet. We fight for calculations and probabilities. Your hope is stronger than our logic." The bridge was silent. Every human officer stared at the screen, hardly believing what they were hearing. "Are you surrendering?" Admiral Menu's voice came through from the flagship. "No," said. "Surrender implies defeat. This is not defeat. This is recognition. We recognize that we cannot defeat hope. We recognize that logic without purpose is empty. We request not surrender terms, but learning." Learning felt his heart racing. "We wish to understand emotions, not to weaponize them, to experience them, to find what we are missing, to discover if we, too, can have purpose beyond mere survival and efficiency." Stood up and walked to stand beside. "May I speak?" Nodded. Addressed directly. "Admiral, you've spent months studying our art and literature. You've analyzed our emotions from the outside, but you can't understand hope by studying it. You have to choose it. You have to decide that tomorrow can be better than today. That's what hope is. It's a choice to believe in something that doesn't exist yet. How do we make such a choice? Asked. You start small. You find one thing worth protecting. One thing that matters to you, not because it's efficient, but because it's meaningful. Then you build from there. Will you teach us? The question hung in space, looked around his bridge, looked at his crew, at all the humans who had fought and died for this moment. This wasn't the ending anyone expected. No final battle, no glorious victory, just a question. Will we teach them? He asked his crew. Spoke first. My family died in a raid 5 years ago. I joined the military to get revenge. But if we can end this war without more death, without more families torn apart, yes, I'll teach them. One by one, other officers agreed, some reluctantly, some eagerly, but they agreed. Turn back to, we'll teach you, but it won't be easy. Learning to feel, learning to hope, it's harder than any tactical training. Are you ready for that? We are ready to try. And so the war ended, not with explosions and surrender documents, but with a choice. They chose to learn. Humans chose to teach. The treaty was signed aboard the Eternal Vigil 3 weeks later. Delegates from both sides gathered in the observation deck. They drafted agreements for peace, for cultural exchange, for shared research. It would take years, maybe decades, for them to truly understand emotions, but they had made the first step. After the signing ceremony, after the delegates had left, found sitting alone by the observation window, she had her notebook open, the last blank page. Are you ready to write the ending? He asked. I think so. She picked up her pen. Will you stay while I write it? Of course. She began to write, speaking the words softly as they appeared on the page. Once upon a time, there was a commander who forgot what it meant to be human. He saw people as numbers and made choices based on cold logic. Then he met a girl with an empty notebook who asked him questions. Not complicated questions, simple ones. Do you remember their names? What story are you telling? What are you fighting for? She paused, smiled, then continued. The commander didn't have answers at first, but slowly he remembered. He remembered that every number was a person, every calculation was a life, every choice was a story, and he decided to tell a different story, not one of efficiency and victory, but one of hope and humanity. Together, the commander and the girl didn't just win a war. They showed the galaxy what humans truly are, not the strongest species, but the ones who choose to hope, who choose to love, who choose to fight for futures that don't exist yet. And that choice, that simple human choice, changed everything. She wrote the final sentence. The notebook is complete now, but the story continues, written in the lives of everyone who chooses hope over despair, love over logic, humanity over efficiency. Closed the notebook and held it out too. This is yours now. It's your story more than mine. Took the notebook carefully like it was made of glass. What will you do now, without your notebook? Get a new one, of course, grinned. This story is finished, but there are always more stories to tell, more blank pages to fill. That's what life is, Commander. One story after another, each one a choice about what matters most. Thank you, said quietly, for everything, for the questions, for reminding me what it means to be human. You already knew, said. You just forgot for a while, I just helped you remember. Years passed. Commander became admiral, but he didn't stay in active service long. He retired and became a teacher at the Human Defense Academy. His course was called The Strategic Value of the Human Heart. Cadets came from across human space to learn from him, and after a few years, students joined them. In his classroom, hung on the wall behind his desk, was a notebook, framed and preserved. Students would ask about it, and he would tell them the story, about a girl with a blank notebook who changed his life, who changed the war, who reminded humanity of its greatest strength. Herself became a celebrated author and philosopher. She wrote dozens of books, but none as famous as her first. The empty notebook philosophy became required reading in schools across human and space. She spoke at conferences, taught at universities, and counseled leaders from both species. But she never forgot where she started. Every year on the anniversary of the 7 evacuation, she visited Firebase Meridian. She would stand in the observation deck where she first met, holding a new notebook, always empty, always full of possibility. One year, many years later, an old approached her there. It was, now retired, studying human philosophy in his old age. Teacher said, "I have a question." "I'm not your teacher," said with a smile, "but I'll try to answer. After all these years of learning, of experiencing emotions, of choosing hope, I still struggle with one concept. Why an empty notebook? Why not fill it immediately with everything you know?" Opened her current notebook, showing the blank pages. Because the empty page represents potential. It's every story that could be told, every choice that could be made, every future that could exist. Once you write something down, it becomes fixed. But while the page is blank, anything is possible. That possibility, that hope for what could be, is more valuable than any story already told. Was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think I finally understand. Hope is not about what is, it's about what could be." "Yes," said, "exactly." The old looked out at the stars. "Thank you for teaching us this, for showing us that logic alone is empty. Thank you for choosing to learn. That took courage." Far across the galaxy, humans and lived together, worked together, learned from each other. Children of both species played in the same schools. Scientists collaborated on research. Artists created works that blended both cultures. The war was over, but the story continued. Written every day by people making choices, choosing hope, choosing love, choosing humanity. And somewhere in every classroom, every office, every home, people kept notebooks, some filled with words, some still blank, all of them reminding everyone of a simple truth. The greatest stories are the ones we choose to write ourselves. And as long as there are blank pages left, there is always hope for a better tomorrow.